The first 72 hours in prison, the brutal reality no one warns you about. Before we go any further, subscribe, lock in, and stay with me because what you're about to hear isn't a movie script. It's what happens when the cell door slams shut for the first time and no one is coming to save you. The sirens were still echoing across the Bronx when 24-year-old Marcus Reed was thrown face-first onto wet pavement. Hours earlier, he had been running through traffic, accused of a fatal stabbing outside a downtown nightclub. Police body cam footage showed flashing lights, shouting officers, and Marcus screaming that they had the wrong man. A witness had pointed at him. That was enough. By sunrise, he was processed and placed on a transport bus heading over the bridge toward Rikers Island. The skyline faded behind steel grating. Inside the bus, no one spoke. Veterans stared at the floor. New arrivals tried to look invisible. The intake area smelled of bleach and sweat. Officers moved quickly, removing belts, laces, dignity. Marcus kept repeating that security footage would clear him. No one responded. In facilities long criticized for violence and understaffing, the first hours aren't about innocence. They're about survival. Across the Atlantic, inspection reports had exposed similar chaos inside HMP Birmingham. Overcrowded wings, drugs flooding corridors, new inmates pressured within hours of arrival. And in Australia, inquiries into Don Dale Youth Detention Centre revealed harsh handling of vulnerable detainees during intake. Different countries. Same pattern. The first 72 hours decide everything. Marcus was placed in a holding pen with 6 men awaiting classification. One of them, a tall inmate with a faded neck tattoo, watched him too closely. "What are you in for?" the man asked softly. Marcus hesitated. He had already heard the rule whispered on the bus. Your charge can determine your fate. Hours passed. Paperwork stalled. Staffing was thin. Night approached. When they finally assigned Marcus to a housing unit, the officer muttered, "Keep your head down." The steel door clanged open. Inside, the tier was loud, shouting, metal clanging, TVs blaring. Eyes followed him to his cell. He thought the worst part was being accused of murder. He was wrong. Because less than 12 hours into his detention, a corrections supervisor reviewing external CCTV footage from the nightclub made a call. The timestamp didn't match Marcus's arrest, and the real suspect had just been identified. But inside Rikers, the message hadn't reached his housing unit yet. By the time the paperwork error was discovered, Marcus Reed had already survived his first night on the tier. Or at least, that's what he thought. The housing unit inside Rikers Island never truly slept. The fluorescent lights dimmed, but they never turned off. Shouting echoed from distant cells. Somewhere down the corridor, 2 men argued over a debt. A metal tray slammed against bars. Laughter followed. Marcus lay on the thin mattress, fully clothed, shoes tucked under his head. He had been warned within minutes of arrival. Don't talk too much, don't look weak. The tall inmate with the faded neck tattoo, everyone called him Bishop, had made it clear the tier ran on quiet understandings. Protection cost something. Refusal cost more. Around 2:17 a.m., a fight erupted 3 cells down. Officers were slow to respond. Staffing shortages had been flagged for years, and that night, only 2 guards were covering the entire section. By the time they intervened, 1 inmate was bleeding from the mouth. No one said who started it. Marcus understood the message. New arrivals were being assessed. The next morning, word spread through whispers before breakfast trays arrived. "Your case is on the news," someone said. "They're saying they got the wrong guy." Hope surged through him, but hope inside jail can be dangerous. It makes you visible. Bishop approached during rec time. "If you're leaving soon," he said quietly, "you won't need protection. But if that paperwork drags, you will." Marcus didn't answer. Across the ocean, inspectors in the UK had once described similar power structures inside HMP Birmingham, unofficial hierarchies forming faster than formal classifications. In Australia, former detainees from Don Dale Youth Detention Centre testified that the first days determined who was targeted and who was shielded. Institutions change. Human behavior doesn't. By late afternoon, Marcus was called to intake again. His heart pounded. He imagined release papers. apologies, sunlight. Instead, an officer handed him a form. Hold for investigation. Bail review pending. The prosecutor wasn't ready to drop charges. The real suspect had fled. Marcus was being kept. When he returned to the housing unit, something had shifted. The tier had seen the news too. Some inmates believed he might walk free. Others believed he was lying. That night, Bishop stepped into his cell doorway. "Now you're in limbo," Bishop said calmly. "And limbo is the most dangerous place to be." Behind them, a guard's radio crackled with reports of another incident 2 floors below. And Marcus realized the clock on his first 72 hours had just reset. By the second night, Marcus understood something no courtroom had prepared him for. Innocence doesn't shield you in a place built on suspicion. The rumor that he might be released had spread across the tier like smoke. Some inmates kept their distance. Others saw opportunity. A man with nothing to lose doesn't fear consequences, and a man who might walk free becomes a liability. During breakfast, Bishop sat across from him. "You're attracting attention," he said quietly. "People think you're talking to officers." Marcus wasn't. But perception inside a jail can be more powerful than truth. That afternoon, a fight broke out in the recreation cage. It started with shoving, then escalated. Marcus backed away, hands raised, but someone yelled his name. In seconds, he was pulled into the chaos. Officers rushed in late, separating bodies, issuing disciplinary threats. Marcus was escorted to medical for a split lip and bruised ribs. In the infirmary, a nurse leaned close. "You need protective custody?" she asked softly. Protective custody. Isolation. A different kind of danger. He declined. Meanwhile, outside the jail walls, investigators were closing in on the real suspect. Surveillance footage from the nightclub showed a second figure, hooded, left-handed, moving with purpose. A fingerprint lifted from a broken bottle matched a man with prior assault charges. Detectives tracked his phone ping to Queens, then lost it near the waterfront. The district attorney's office hesitated. They needed the suspect in custody before dismissing Marcus's charge. Until then, procedure held him in place. Inside, procedure meant nothing. That evening, the tier went into lockdown after contraband was found in another cell. Doors slammed. Tension thickened. Bishop appeared again, standing just outside Marcus's bars. "You got 2 more days before people decide what you are," he said. "Asset or problem?" Marcus stared at the steel sink, the scratched paint, the names carved into the wall. He thought about similar reports from facilities overseas, inspectors warning about overcrowding inside HMP Birmingham, inquiries detailing harsh handling of vulnerable detainees at Dale Youth Detention Center. Different continents, same pressure cooker. Near midnight, the lights flickered. A scream echoed from the far end of the tier. Then running footsteps. Then silence. The next morning, officers removed an inmate from the unit on a stretcher. No one spoke about what happened. But when Marcus returned from a brief attorney call, he found a message scratched into the paint beside his bunk. "Time's up." And he knew the third night would decide everything. The third night bled into the fourth without warning. Lockdown lifted just after midnight inside Rikers Island, and the tier exhaled like a living thing. Doors buzzed. Men stepped into the corridor. Marcus stayed seated on his bunk, every instinct screaming to stay invisible. Bishop didn't. He stopped outside Marcus's cell, blocking the doorway with his body. "You had your chance," he said calmly. "People think you're bringing heat. That gets men hurt." Before Marcus could respond, shouting erupted 2 tiers above them. Officers ran past. Radios crackled. The momentary chaos was all it took. Hands reached in. Someone grabbed Marcus's shirt, dragging him toward the bars. Another voice hissed, "Make it quick." The fear wasn't loud. It was focused. Efficient. Then everything froze. A commanding voice cut through the noise. "Step back. Now." Corrections officers flooded the tier, weapons drawn. Bishop raised his hand slowly, eyes locked on Marcus, with something close to disappointment. Within minutes, Marcus was escorted out, cuffed, heart racing, unsure whether he was being punished or saved. In a holding room near intake, a detective waited. He didn't sit. He stood, arms folded, eyes tired. They caught him, the detective said. The real suspect. Tried to flee the city. Fingerprints matched. Charges against you are being dropped. Marcus didn't feel relief. Not yet. Paperwork took hours. Dawn crept through reinforced windows. Every delay felt like another gamble with his life. Finally, just after sunrise, an officer removed his cuffs. "You're clear," she said. "You're lucky." Marcus walked out thinner, quieter, changed. Weeks later, an internal review would note that staffing shortages and delayed communication nearly led to a serious incident. Similar language had appeared in inspection reports overseas, in the UK, in Australia, after vulnerable detainees were placed in unsafe conditions during their first days inside. The pattern was documented. The warnings were written. The system kept moving anyway. Marcus never returned to court. The charges vanished from the docket. But the memory of those first 72 hours followed him longer than any sentence could have. Because prison didn't wait for guilt. It tested survival first. And if you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one, hit subscribe so you don't miss it.